Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 66 of our chapter by chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 65 of A Game of Thrones, that's Arya 5.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We will summarise what has happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and other things of note in this chapter, which will be particularly convenient if you are not reading along with us.
Indeed.
How are you, sir?
I'm okay. It's a little earlier than we've been recording lately.
We don't normally record in the morning like this.
No.
It's a bit of a shock to the system.
So I
you get up and work.
I had to get the sleepers out of my eyes and do the red leather, yellow leather, make sure my voice was there. But otherwise, I'm all right. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, and we ran long in our discussion last week about Molly, so I never got a chance to ask you. Have you watched Queen's Gambit?
I haven't. It's on the list to watch because it's I like chess.
Yes, and the only things I know about chess are the things you've taught me. So I'm not much of a chess player. And Stacy knows probably less than I do, and we loved it. Loved it.
High praise. I'll give it a try. Thank you for the recommendation.
Is one of the best shows I watched this year. It's fantastic. Wow. Chess can be a little dry to watch if you don't know really what you're watching, but they have made the chess matches so exciting. But it's not just about the chess matches. It's just everything about it. The main character is so engaging and interesting. It's a fantastic show. I'd recommend it to anybody, whether you like chess or not. And I know you very much like chess. So.
I do. I told you I'm in the work chess tournament at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, not going well.
No. Well.
They stuck me in the A bracket with the people who are really good at chess. And
well, that's you as well.
No. I've told you before, I'm aware of how good I am at chess and my limitations, and I'm also aware that these guys don't share those limitations.
Well, are you still the president of the club? I guess not.
No. God, no. I wasn't very good at that.
What was that story when you started the chess club at Lucas's school and you overheard the kid talking about why he joined the chess club?
Oh, McKelly, you can't spring these things on me. I have no recollection of it. I have a vague recollection of that happening. I mean, I remember starting the chess club at Lucas's school, and I remember a story about a kid saying something.
Yeah, that's about what I've got too. But I remember it being very funny and us laughing for a while about it.
Yeah, well, the one thing I remember about it was so it was we held it in a classroom before school started, and this was a classroom where the sort of special education teachers all worked, and one of them was always in there. The others hadn't arrived, but the I think she was the speech therapist, was always in there.
Okay,
that woman hated my guts. Because I came in there, sort of like, she's in there trying to get a bit of work done before school. Yeah. I would come in there like 5 minutes before chess club, and I would just race around setting up all these chessboards. And then like 40 kids would descend, and it would be absolute bedlam. Just pandemonium in there. She'd be sitting in the corner, just seething, like, how did this happen to me?
Hey, it's not your fault. You didn't pick the classroom. I assume the principal assigned you a room.
well, it was this. If you remember, Lucas's school was being rebuilt, so they were off at the temporary place where the schools go to when their schools are under repair. So it was like in these modular
classrooms,
which weren't very good, and there wasn't much room for anything. So that's why we were doubled up. This poor woman.
The chess club has stopped, right? It's no longer running.
He left that school 6 years ago,
right?
So
yeah,
I think it carried on for like another half a year without me.
Till she put her foot down.
Probably just her and the 30 kids, and even more bedlam.
She had to learn how to play chess quickly. Shoot. Anyway, Queen's Gambit. I recommend it to anyone. I love the fact that it's a limited series, because as much as I, enjoy long-running series shows, sometimes you just want someone to tell a story. You don't want them to have to come up with a second reason and a third reason and fourth reason to keep these characters all together. Like, they had a story, they told it in 7 or 8 episodes, however long it was, and that was it.
I think I've told you this before. I think it's the fatal flaw of American television.
Yeah, you
have. This desire to make things episodic. When you had a good story, if you had a good story, tell that story and then come up with a different good story.
Absolutely.
Don't say, that was successful, let's make 200 more episodes.
Yeah.
Because that's when it becomes like, yeah.
Exactly.
That's when formulaicness breaks in,
Yeah. Stranger Things. I really like Stranger Things. The first season was fantastic. I really felt like it should have stopped there. I enjoyed seasons 2 and 3, or however many they've made now, but they've basically just been variations of the first season. Just keeping these kids together. And I thought it was perfect if they had stopped it at the end of the first season and just made it a limited series. Anyway, I know they make more money. I'm sure they've made a gazillion more dollars.
Right, and that's the driver, yeah.
Exactly.
Don't entertain us, make more money.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right, let's get down to business. Quick recap of what Arya was up to. Last we saw Arya, which was some time ago, she was scrambling to avoid capture as the Stark fortunes in King's Landing were taking a nosedive, courtesy of the treachery of Peter Baelish and Janos Slynt's gold cloaks, and her own father's stubborn honour.
Right.
That was another contributing factor to their nosediving fortunes.
Wasn't helping, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, how long is it since we've talked about Arya? Since we've had Arya?
I looked that up. The last time we had an Arya chapter, it was published on August 10th. So we recorded it even earlier than that. So
wow, so that's 3 months ago?
I think so.
Yeah, even more than 3 months ago by the time this gets published.
Yeah.
Alright, why don't we give them the summary?
Okay. So Arya is barely scraping by alone on the streets of King's Landing slum called Flea Bottom. She's living off of pigeon meat and a years-old soup called a bowl of brown that contains mystery meats she does not care to think about. She's friendless, penniless, and sleeps wherever she can find a safe-ish place to lay her head. The valuables she meant to sell last chapter were stolen from her the first night in the streets, although she does still have Needle, thankfully.
She'd leave the city and start the long journey home to Winterfell if she could, but she hasn't had any luck getting out through the city gates. She knows the gold cloaks and Lannister men are looking for her, so she stayed clear of them. Unfortunately, the gates and walls are full of both, searching every wagon and inspecting every person wanting to leave the city.
Arya decides a trip to the riverfront is in order. She hasn't checked the river gate yet today, and she's inspired by a story from Old Nan about kids who stow away on ships and live out wild adventures. To her shock and delight, she sees Stark men waiting by the Wind Witch, the very same ship that was to take her and Sansa home to Winterfell. Her spirits soar and she's moved to tears. However, as she approaches, Syrio Forel's lessons kick in, and she looks closer at the scene.
She doesn't recognize any of the men, and she knew all of her father's people. At the last second, she pretends to be a beggar boy, and they run her off. She heads off to Flea Bottom for that bowl of brown. When she arrives, bells are ringing at the Sept of Baelor. Some around her think it means Joff is dead, but more astute observers point out that it's not enough bells for that. These are summoning bells, and people keep mentioning the King's Hand.
After a hard and painful fall, Arya goes with the flow of the crowd to the Sept of Baelor and climbs Baelor's statue to get a view of the pulpit. She sees her father, dressed in ornate Stark clothes, but looking thin and weak. She also finds King Joffrey, Queen Cersei, and her sister Sansa in attendance. It angers Arya that her sister looks so happy while her father appears to be in such peril.
Ned announces that he's committed treason and tried to steal the throne for himself. He then announces that Joff is the true king of the Seven Kingdoms. The High Septon asks Joffrey what will be done with Ned. Joffrey says that his mother wants him to allow Ned to take the Black, and Sansa has asked for mercy. He smiles at Sansa, giving Arya hope for leniency. Then he turns to the crowd and delivers his sentence. But they have the soft hearts of women. So long as I am your king, treason shall never go unpunished. Sir Ilyn, bring me his head.
Oof. Chaos erupts all around. The crowd is loving the drama. Those on the pulpit are less thrilled. Cersei, Varys, and the High Septon all make their cases to Joff to reconsider. Arya hears her sister scream and fall to her knees, sobbing hysterically. Meanwhile, Sir Ilyn has made his way onto the pulpit. Arya drops from her spot into the crowd and begins pushing and crawling through the mass of spectators, slashing with needle when necessary. Up above, Ned has been forced onto the marble as Sir Ilyn draws a two-handed greatsword that Arya recognizes immediately as Ice, her father's own Valyrian steel sword.
At that moment, a hand comes out of the crowd and grabs Arya's arm like a vice. The man forces Arya to look at him rather than what's happening above. Arya hears a soft sighing sound, but the man keeps her focus on him. He keeps referring to her as boy, and she realizes that she knows him. He's Yoren of the Night's Watch, who'd once visited her father. Yoren tells Arya that he, Arya, will be coming with him and that he, Arya, will be keeping his mouth shut. Arya starts to argue, but a blade waved in her face changes her mind.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, not to focus on the minutiae of the most important of chapters, but does he cut her hair at the end there?
I don't think so.
That blade in her face, because I found it confusing, because it says he grabs her hair and then swishes the blade, and I assume, I mean, he wouldn't just wave a blade in her face.
Yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about whether he was cutting her hair or not.
I think he's cutting her hair.
She mentions that she's trying to pull away, but he's got such a whole tight grip on it that she can feel her scalp ripping. So, yeah, why? My only other thought about that was that maybe he's just trying to get her to shut up. Don't argue with me that you're not a boy.
I would think that the vice-like grip on arm/hair would be enough to keep her fairly still.
But this is Arya.
So I think it wasn't particularly well written because it's very confusing, but I think he cuts her hair. Okay. That's what he does.
Yeah.
Because it says he swishes twice while he's gripping her hair, and she says hair gets pulled out. So I think that's what he did. He cut her hair so she looks more like a boy.
Okay.
There you go. We've cleared up the most important part of
this. Right. All the rest is just fluff.
Yeah. And honestly, if I had to choose a barber, I would choose Yoren over Sir Ilyn.
Yeah.
He cuts a lot closer.
Now Ned learns to lie. This skill would have been so useful several chapters ago, my dear Ned. Well, we'll get into Ned and all that later on, but let's start with the less heavy stuff, I guess.
Well, I don't know. Arya's plight is not great.
Yes, it's certainly not.
But she's learning to survive. I mean, going to the bakery district to hunt for pigeons is smart.
Yeah.
And she still has the wooden training sword as well as needle. Those are her two possessions, basically: a real sword and a fake sword.
Right. Aside from the clothes on her back, and I think she's wearing a cloak because I think she keeps the cloak over needle to keep others from seeing it. Because of Forel's training, she's pretty quick, and so when she sneaks up on the pigeons, she's able to bat them out of the air with the training sword. Yeah, that's quite the deft hand-eye reflexes there. Well, I'm not sure. I was thinking about that, and actually, that might be kind of what all of us could do, because I've tried to creep up on pigeons before. In fact, as a very young child, it was one of my favourite occupations, was trying to catch pigeons. You didn't know this? I did not know this fact. Wait, there's very few, I mean, being as old as I am, there's very few photos of my childhood, but the ones that there are of me in diapers chasing pigeons, basically. Wow. So that was your first pastime. Yeah. Chasing pigeons. But if I had a mean streak, or a reason to really want to catch the pigeons, and a wooden stick in my hand, I might have caught a few. I never caught any. Right. But if I really, because I mean, obviously, I'm not saying Arya's got a mean streak because she's doing it. She needs the pigeons to survive. I get it, but I didn't need the pigeons to survive. My family were feeding me other food. It wasn't right. Yes. Wow, what insight from a rare pigeon catching expert. Huh.
Yeah, in fact, I hadn't thought of that to mention that until this second. Actually, it's not like I was like, "Oh, I should mention." But yeah, I think there's only like, I mean, there's a handful of photos of me from when I'm under 4, but all the ones where I'm vertical, I'm chasing pigeons.
That's fantastic. I never knew this.
Mm-hmm.
And Simon has walked me down his street using Google Maps. Google Earth, I think it was. Yeah, you've taken me down your street, down to the park at the one end, and wasn't there a pseudo celebrity up at the other end of the street or something?
Well, yes, we had a TV star live on our street.
See how fancy the McGrother clan was.
Mm-hmm. Well, TV celebrities in England live in ordinary houses, basically.
Right.
I mean, literally, she lived in a terraced house. She had a neighbour to her left, a neighbour to her right. She could bang on the walls. I think maybe it wasn't her only home. I have a feeling she had more than one place. But I don't think it was there because I don't remember pigeons in my hometown. They're more city pigeons. So maybe when I was shopping with my mum is when I would see pigeons and I would go running after them.
Wow, fascinating insight there.
You know what's also, I mean, not to belabor, but I don't really feel it anymore. When I see pigeons, like on the ground, I don't feel that need to chase them.
You've grown out of it.
Apparently, I have grown out of that one. Maybe I should sort of let myself go a little bit next time I see a group of pigeons and see where my feet take me.
Exactly. See where your feet take you. Yes. Just watch that shadow, because that's what tipped this pigeon off to Arya's presence was the shadow. So you got to approach from the right side.
Yeah.
But Arya makes quite the
we digress.
Journey. Yes, slightly. But I think that was a very interesting digression there. I found it very interesting anyway. But Arya makes quite the trek around this miles wide city here. She starts on the Street of Flower, which is kind of the western part of King's Landing. Then she heads to the wharfs, which is in the eastern part of King's Landing. Then she heads north up to Flea Bottom, and then she heads southwest, kind of south of where she began at the Streets of Flower, when she makes the trek up Visenya's Hill to the Sept of Baelor. So she does basically a square around the city. So it's good that she's young, because she basically covered the whole city.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you're a hobo, you can be always on the move,
Yeah, sure, right.
People can walk at like 4 miles an hour. If you've got a 14-hour day, you can walk quite a long distance, presumably. Although you'd get hungry.
Right, yes. Yeah, she probably should have gone directly from the Streets of Flower over to Flea Bottom, had her pigeon meal, because in the process she ends up losing her pigeon and never gets to eat
it. She did. So. Yeah. As we expected, she's showing some admirable self-reliance, but it's not exactly sustainable. It's keeping her going for now, but long term she needs to get out of King's Landing. She can't get out of the city because the gates are heavily guarded, and presumably it's for her. I mean,
right.
Not to excuse her paranoia, but I think she's right. I think the only reason to stop people freely coming and going from King's Landing is to catch Arya Stark.
Yeah, this was why we questioned in the last Arya chapter Syrio Farrell's decision not to flee with her. Remember, he said the first hand of Braavos doesn't flee, and he stayed to continue to fight Sir Meryn Trant rather than fleeing with Arya. He made her flee, but then he stayed to fight and said he couldn't flee, and we questioned, well, Meryn Trant is just in complete full armor, and Syrio is just wearing his regular clothes. We felt like they could have successfully outrun him, and he was very possibly the last adult to have any supervision over her if they get separated, and that's exactly what's happened here. So,
can I ask you a question? And I'm sorry to spring this one on you, because this probably might have needed some research, but when Arya first went down into the down below the Red Keep and came out on the river, was she? I mean, that's outside the city walls.
Yes, I personally have some either serious confusion about the layout of King's Landing or pedantry about that we could discuss in pedantry.
So either she could not find her way back to where she went before, or when she went down this time, she gave up and came back out.
Yeah,
using the same route.
Yeah, I don't know how she even last chapter got. Well, yeah, I guess it makes sense. Last chapter, she got outside the city gate down by the river, outside the city wall down by the river, and then just came back through the river gate because it was open at the time.
Right.
So yeah, I guess she must not have been able to find her way down. But there's some in this chapter. There's some very confusing things involving the river and the walls.
Well, let's return to this when we talk about that, because I do have a thought, and we'll see if it makes sense when we talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But even if she had escaped the city on her own, what she doesn't know is she would be heading north right into the Riverlands, which is just being war torn at the moment. So who knows what she would have walked into. Yeah.
I mean, the King's Road is certainly occupied by Tywin's army at the moment. So
now,
she walked far.
They wouldn't have known that she's Arya Stark unless she announces it. Just some random kid on the road, but still could have walked into some harm there.
Yeah, it's handy for Arya that she knew her father's men so well that she hung out with them. Sansa wouldn't have recognized them all, I feel, but Arya knew every one of them.
Right, Arya was much more a woman of the people. She
so
when she gravitated to those kind of folks.
When she goes down to the docks and sees people in Stark gear, she smells a rat because they're not people she recognizes.
Yeah,
they are there to lure her and capture her.
Yeah, it sure seems that way.
Yeah, which is actually quite smart of the Lannisters. Although it might be even smarter to have kept a few Stark men around to make that trap even more appealing.
Right. But the small folk also seem to be aware and intrigued by Renly's covert nighttime departure from King's Landing the night of his brother King Robert's death, because there's a lot of rumors flying around, and actually one of them is incredibly accurate. One of them is that the Goldcloaks had fallen in with the Lannisters, and that their Lord Commander was given lordship, lands on the Trident, and a spot on the Small Council. And I was like, wow, someone is really in the know here. What are these small folks?
Guys reading the book, sitting on the corner like, oh, I know exactly what's going on.
And remember, you might think, well, maybe he or she went to the court session where that all was announced, but there were no small folk at the court session. That was the Sansa chapter, and she mentioned there was only lords there.
I wonder if I mean, presumably the fact that he's on the Small Council is now known, at least to people in the know, and so maybe servants from within the castle have spread that word. Yeah,
or maybe other Goldcloak folks have mentioned it. They're out on the streets.
Yeah. Good point. I was just going to say that I think Renly is perhaps a character that the small folk are interested in. I think he's the kind of character that they follow. Sort of young, dashing,
handsome,
handy with the sword, handsome. Yeah. So he's kind of like the. Oh, I'm going to get her name wrong because I'm not a royalist. I was going to say Meghan Merkel.
Yeah, is that right?
Is that right?
Feels right.
Meghan Merkel. Yeah. He's like the Meghan Merkel of his time. The people are really fascinated. He's been followed by paparazzi drawing pictures of him.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah, because he's very similar to his friend Sir Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, and he's also a big hit with the small folk because of the same reasons. Yeah. He's kind of got the same MO going there. So there's a lot of talk in this chapter about the city gates, and it can be a little bit confusing because there's 7 of them and they're all around. So real quick, I just kind of wanted to go through them. So if you take King's Landing, King's Landing is, when you look at certain maps, some maps make it look like like a square, like the sun, like a square, and the bottom part of the square is south, and the right part of the square is east. But really, if you take that square and turn it on its point so that it's more diamond shaped, that is more how King's Landing is shaped, at least based on the descriptions. So if you do that, if you kind of make a diamond shaped out of the square, you've got the Iron Gate in the northeast side of the wall, which opens near Blackwater Bay, and that is open at the moment only for leaving the city, and that leads out onto Rosby Road. Just west of that, kind of near where the Dragon Pit is, you get the Dragon Gate, and that is closed at the moment. It's barred and closed. Down that northwest wall, I have no idea why it's called the Old Gate, other than it must be the oldest gate. I couldn't find any information about why it's called the Old Gate, so I'm guessing it was probably the first gate. I don't know. That gate is also closed. And then in the west corner of the southwest wall, kind of juts out of the corner there, you get the Gate of the Gods, and that gate opens onto the King's Road coming from the north, and that is open only for entering the city. And then you slide down the southwest wall. In the middle of the southwest wall, you get the Lion Gate, and that gate opens onto the Gold Road, which leads to Casterly Rock, and that gate is barred and closed. Then south of that, in the southwest corner of the southwest wall, you get the King's Gate. That opens out onto the Tourney Grounds. It opens onto the west bank of the Blackwater Rush, and that is open for leaving the city. And then on the middle of the southeast wall, on the east side of the Blackwater Rush, you get the River Gate, also known as the Mud Gate, and that opens to the King's Road heading south. So basically, the traffic in and out of the city is kind of an X, the flow. You've got folks leaving the city from the Iron Gate in the northeast corner and the King's Gate in the southwest corner, and folks entering from the King's Road, both from the northwest corner and the southeast corner. So kind of it makes an X, opposite sides for entering and leaving.
Yeah, all right. I still want to talk more about the geography of King's Landing.
Yeah.
I'm not done with that. So Arya, it's not all gone Arya's way. I mean, not like much of it's going Arya's way.
No, not much at all.
She did have some fine clothes and a bracelet which she was hoping to sell, but that stuff was stolen from her on her first night.
Yeah, that was the stuff
rough.
She found that stuff right when the stable boy last chapter discovered her, and she ended up killing him with needle. That was the stuff she thought, I'm taking this stuff to sell. Didn't work out that way though.
And it's going to be painful for her to see the ship she was supposed to be headed north on. She was that close to getting away, but
yeah,
she of course doesn't know that Sansa helped to spring the trap on her.
Right.
Sansa had just done what she was told.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely feels like that was there set as a trap. I mean, I can't think of any other reason why the Wind Witch would be sitting there and there would be folks dressed as Stark men who weren't Stark men. That it had to have been a trap set by the Lannisters to snare Arya.
No doubt. So then the bells start to ring, and she's forced to dodge out of the way of the Redwine twins, Horace and Hobber, who've been in King's Landing since the tourney of the hand. Yeah.
Sansa saw them at Joff's first court session. They were part of the group of lords that were ignoring her, refusing to make eye contact with her. She called them horror and slobber in that chapter, which Arya mentions that Sansa and Jane Poole used to call them horror and slobber.
Yeah, just a point here that they are the Redwines owe their fealty to the Tyrells, so it's a little bit interesting that they're still around, given that Loras Tyrell left King's Landing with Renly. Is that not right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it makes you wonder if they're being told don't leave town. Right,
or is there some division within the Tyrell? Within the houses of the Reach.
Right.
That some are pro-Lannister and some are anti.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So when Arya follows the crowd, she gets to the Sept of Baelor, and there she sees Ned. He's dressed in the finest Stark clothing she's ever seen him in.
Right.
Which probably suggests it wasn't his.
Right, I wondered that too, if maybe it felt to me like they wanted to make sure, even if you couldn't hear, if you were too far away to hear what was being said on the pulpit, you could see that big Stark direwolf on his vest.
Yep, I think you're right. I think it was done to sort of like build up the make more of a show of this.
Right. Yeah. But up on the pulpit, you get the usual suspects. You've got Joffrey and Queen Cersei and most of I think all of the small well, obviously not Jaime, but aside from Jaime, I believe the rest of the small council is up there. And it's mentioned that Joff's raiment is all in crimson. So whoever's dressing him, I don't know, his mom or whoever, is getting more and more bold with the Lannister colors in his attire. He's gone from like a mix of greens and reds to now he's dressed in all red. He does still have the mix of stags and lions on the clothing, but he's dressed in all crimson, so...
Just in my imagination, slowly every time he wears them, the lion eats the stag a little bit more until it's just a lion, you know.
And also we see the Hound wearing his white cloak of the Kingsguard for the first time, so...
Yeah, and Janos Slint's in more ornate armor than he's had before, so...
Yes, it was the stuff he was
the
showing
loyalists,
off.
Yeah. The loyalists are heading upwards.
Right.
And so then, yes, everything goes very badly. Ned does do what he was supposed to do. He confesses to his sins, and Varys has convinced him that if he does that, he'll get away with this, or at least live to fight another day.
That was what he was promised in the dungeon. Remember, he said, my life's not worth lying about. Varys said, what about Sansa's life?
Yeah. So then maybe if you could ask Ned about this, he might take this deal, because his life was forfeit for the treason, but by confessing to it, he saved Sansa. Whereas if he continued to deny it, Sansa might have been taken down with him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a rough point.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So, but just a mention here. I mean, we've mentioned this before. This is history repeating itself for the Starks. When they're summoned to King's Landing by the king, they don't come back.
Yep, that's exactly what happened to Ned's older brother Brandon and their father Rickard.
Yeah, but even the most casual student of history would be aware of the fact that this did not go well for the king who issued that order.
Oh, solid point. Yes,
Mad King Aerys.
Right.
His realm was torn apart as a result of that decision.
Yep.
Fingers crossed for Joffrey then. in one direction or the other.
And so Arya notices that when Sir Illian draws his sword, it's actually ice. It's Ned's sword. That's rather cold.
I see what you did there. Well done. We shouldn't be laughing. This is
a very somber scene. But yeah, that's terrible, using his own sword on him. I mean,
yeah, and not wielding the blade yourself. Ned died with a look of scorn on his face for Joffrey Baratheon.
That's true. That's what he's always preaching.
Exactly.
He who makes the sentence should swing the sword. I'm not sure that Joff could lift that sword though. It's a big sword, probably as tall as he is. Again,
not to completely forget the victim here, but this has tipped the balance of power a little bit, because we were just last time when Jaime was captured by Catelyn and Robb, we were looking at basically the captive lists.
Yeah, the scoreboard of captives.
The scoreboard, and it was pretty tight. But now the biggest asset on the Lannisters' captive list has just been taken off it permanently.
Of course, as long as Cat believes that they have both Sansa and Arya, even if she knew that they only have Sansa, she's not going to do anything that might cause them to hurt Sansa as well. You know, they've still got a key piece that's going to keep the Starks from hurting Jaime, probably.
True, and also she's kind of, if she had any illusions about what the Lannisters might do to their captives,
right?
they will quickly be eradicated by this when this news reaches her.
Absolutely.
But still, it's a wrong decision by Joffrey.
Yeah. And we're not the only ones that noticed.
No.
On the pulpit, the Septon, the High Septon, Lord Varys, Queen Cersei, they all kind of just like surrounded Joff, pleading to him, please. You couldn't hear what they were saying, but Arya got the impression that they were pleading to get him to reconsider. And I was thinking when I read this part, maybe this is why you have a king or queen regent, because a child should not be in charge of such important decisions. And Cersei is the queen regent, so shouldn't it have been her call that was heeded, not Joff's? Last Sansa chapter, she was named queen regent, light of the west, and protector of the realm. So,
yeah, the thing is, though, I think ultimately the authority still lies with the king, even if the queen regent. I mean, I think maybe if you are truly a regent and the king is too young to make his own actions, you don't bring him to these things, because if he does contradict you, he's still the king.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm sure they don't have a written constitution explaining all this.
I've often wondered this, because I wondered this the chapter when Ned was, when the Gold Cloaks turned on Ned, because he was king regent at the time, and it ultimately comes down to who has more the bigger force,
Right. Right.
In that instance, it was who has the bigger force, but in this instance, they have an equal force because they're on the same side. So if you have a queen regent in this instance, what's the point of the queen regent if the king can just overrule you anyway, even if he's too young to actually rule? Isn't that kind of the point of the queen regent, is the king's too young to make decisions that we can trust will benefit the realm, so we have an adult making these calls until the king comes of age. But that's not what happened here. So
yeah. I think the other thing is that this incident makes the end game of this war way different, because there was a potential end game for this war whereby they come to some agreement, they trade prisoners, and they go their separate ways.
Right.
Maybe the North breaks away into its own kingdom. Maybe the North accepts Joffrey and promises to be good. And
you don't, but that far north, they're not going to have much influence over from King's Landing anyway. Yeah,
but now the Starks will fight to the death now.
Absolutely, yeah,
because of what's just happened. And so either the Lannisters win or Joffrey loses the throne.
Right,
I would say.
This is, it has completely changed the landscape of this dispute here.
Now, one thing that you mentioned was that Jaime, they don't know that Jaime is a prisoner yet.
Yes, exactly. Would that change things?
Yeah, and I was thinking about would that change things, and I was thinking that as it was, Cersei is not an agent of chaos in the way that Joffrey is.
Right.
But she's not totally straight-laced and conservative and careful. She's...
True.
She is one for the bold moves herself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think she said, "Oh, Joffrey, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do..." Oh, well. However, had she known what we know, I think she would have said, "Listen to me, Sir Ilyn Payne. I am the Queen Regent, and you will not do what he just said. He's an idiot. He's a naughty boy, and he's going to be sent to bed early."
So then she would have invoked that Queen Regent power.
Exactly. That's what I think would have happened.
So you're thinking then, based on that, you're thinking she did not want to make Joffrey look like a weak king by overruling him in front of everyone and saying, "No, that's not what's going to happen." But had she known Jaime's life might have been at stake, she might have said, "Sorry, I thought I could let him make this call. Yes. Apparently I can't."
Yes, that is what I think. Although I don't think she's... No, I mean, I think you summarized it pretty well. I think she did want him to change his mind. I think she was actively trying to get him to think that through and do something different.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he is her son. They are somewhat similar.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And so she was like, you know what? Let's see how this plays out. You know?
Well, yeah, she certainly didn't put up too much of a fight here.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, they're saying that there's a lot of chaos when he makes the announcement. She might have been in tears pleading, for all we know.
Right.
But that's not the impression you get. The impression you get is she said a few things like, please reconsider, and when he didn't, she went, meh.
Okay. Yeah, because at this point, this is when Arya, who's kind of up in the statue so that she can get a look, drops down into the crowd, so she no longer has a great view of what's going on. She can hear Sansa screaming and pleading, but Arya, in the meantime, is kind of trying to bully her way through this crowd, which I know you've got some pedantry that crossed my mind as well about this particular scene. But as she's trying to fight her way up to the pulpit to try and save her father, Yoren's hand comes out of nowhere and grabs her arm, and she can't shake him. And he does a good thing. He makes her watch him and not what's going on the stage, because that's definitely for the best.
Yeah. That's gonna leave a memory if you see that happen.
Yes, and
not much doubt about it.
He also prevents her from getting to the pulpit, which eventually she was going to do, even if the crowd started to disperse after the fact. That was not going to prevent Arya from getting to that pulpit, where she was either going to get herself killed or captured at the very least.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
He prevented those two things.
Yeah, so she's not sure who's gripped her arm at first. She doesn't. But then she sort of looks at him and sort of like smells him, and she's like reminded she's actually met this guy before. She was trying to tell Ned what she'd heard in the dungeons, and Yoren was asking Ned for more men for the Night's Watch. So they'd actually met before, and if you remember, even at the time, Yoren mistook her for a boy.
Yeah, he called her, "This must be your son. He's got your look."
So I think he's not joking about that. He wants her to become a boy to help get her out of King's Landing.
Right, because it seems pretty obvious his plan is to pretend like she is a new recruit for the Night's Watch, take her north with him, and in order for this to be successful, she has to pretend to be a boy.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing. So this is kind of the first example of this, but I just thought I'd mention it. I think Martin has a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a monster with the characters that he creates.
Yeah,
and just
absolutely
treating them as disposable. I mean, we had in the last chapter we had Khal Drogo on death's door,
right?
And now we've got Ned quite a bit beyond that door.
Yes, he's already in the Nightlands waiting for Khal Drogo.
Yeah. So these are really the first examples of this, but typically, when you're reading a book, you have like an expectation, a sort of social contract with the writer of the book that the characters that you've invested in are going to be there in the final reel.
Right, yes. Absolutely.
Or if not, they're going to die near the end in a heroic way.
Right.
But like the most important character in this book just got beheaded.
Yeah.
Just out of the blue, without any. You didn't even have his POV, which might not have been very pleasant to read, but ouch.
Yeah. He had. Speaking of POVs, I mean, we do these episodes. We number the POV, and I believe we were on like Ned 14 or 15 or something like that. So he had outnumbered. He's outpaced all the other characters by at least 5 or so.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone else was beyond 10.
So the shock of this, that the character that you thought was the central character of the book is now gone before we're even a seventh of the way through the story.
Yeah, we were not even at the end of this book yet. There's still more chapters to go. Yeah, my first experience with this scene was from watching the TV show, and I thought for sure something or someone was going to save him. And I remember when no one or nothing came and saved him, just like mouth open, stunned, like, did that just happen? This has to have been a dream. They couldn't have really just killed off Ned Stark.
Yeah.
But indeed they did.
And so now every time one of the characters is in any kind of peril, I mean, that's the thing, you read a book, your main character's in peril, They're going to be fine. They're
Right,
going to pull through.
They'll find a way out of this.
Exactly. Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore. You have just zero expectation now. I mean, well, no, you still have an expectation that they'll survive, but you have no trust that it's going to happen.
Right. That social contract has been broken. For sure.
Yeah. So, you got some background?
Yeah. So last chapter...
You have a lot of background.
Well, last Arya chapter, we talked about Lord Lucas Haraway, the Hand of the King to Maegor Targaryen, a.k.a. Maegor the Cruel, or sometimes on this show referred to as Maegor the Misunderstood.
I think I'm the one who's misunderstood.
You may remember that he was thrown from the roof of the Tower of the Hand in that story because he was accused of lining up men to impregnate his daughter, Alice, the second wife of Maegor, in an attempt to create an heir for the king. So now let's look at things from Alice's perspective. Because Maegor was failing to do so. Yes, right. Exactly. So Alice Haraway married then Prince Maegor in 39 AC in a Valyrian wedding ceremony, officiated by his mother, the Dowager Queen Visenya Targaryen, because the Septon at Dragonstone refused to perform the wedding. And the
because
reason,
it was a second...
Yes, exactly.
Right.
The reason he refused to perform it is because Maegor was already married to Lady Cerise Hightower.
Oh, stickler.
Yeah. Whom Maegor claimed to be barren. So this taking of a second wife didn't sit very well with much of the realm, and the High Septon denounced the marriage as sin and fornication and called Alice this whore of Haraway, and many of the pious lords in the realm began calling her Maegor's whore.
That's a little bit mean to Alice, to be honest. It's not her who's committing the crime here.
It's true. To my knowledge, she did not have a husband at the time.
Right.
Maegor's brother, King Aenys the First Targaryen, who had neither known of the marriage prior to the ceremony nor given his leave for it, was less than pleased. And a furious King Aenys gave his brother a choice. He could set Alice aside or go into exile for 5 years. Maegor chose the latter option, and in 40 AC, Alice and Maegor left Westeros for Pentos to begin their exile, leaving his first wife, Cerise, behind. After a couple of years in Essos, Maegor received a visit from his mother, Queen Visenya, informing him that his brother, King Aenys, had died. On learning the news, Maegor returned to Westeros in 42 AC to claim the Iron Throne. That plan didn't go as smoothly as Maegor might have liked, but that is a story for another day. Alice too returned from Pentos, but not alone. She was accompanied by Tyanna of the Tower, a woman rumored to be Alice's paramour.
I say.
Maegor took Tyanna as his third wife later that year, and Alice presided over the bedding ceremony and joined in Maegor and Tyanna in their wedding night.
Blimey.
You didn't know this episode was going to get so racy, did you? As we know from the last story, in 44 AC, Alice became pregnant and gave birth to a stillborn, eyeless, and twisted child. Maegor ordered the execution of those in charge of the queen's care, sparing only Alice's sisters and the other two queens. Later, Queen Tyanna informed the king that the stillborn boy was a result of Alice's many affairs. Queen Alice was subsequently dragged from her bed by the knights of the Kingsguard. Her sisters were cut down when they tried to intervene. As we know, her father was flung from the Tower of the Hand, and Alice's brothers, uncles, and cousins were put on the spikes that lined the dry moat around Maegor's holdfast. Alice herself received the worst death of all. She was given over to Tyanna. Her death is said to have taken a fortnight of agonizing torture for which Maegor himself was present. After her death, Alice's body was cut into 7 parts and mounted on spikes above the 7 gates of King's Landing, which is the tie-in I used for this story with this chapter.
Glad there was something.
Of course, in 48 AC, Queen Tyanna confessed that she poisoned Alice's child in the womb.
Ooh, so that's quite a lot of damage was done by that little lie.
Yes, it was. Okay. Basically, the entire Haraway family, the whole House Haraway, was pretty much exterminated because of this.
Ouch.
And she was like, "Oh, by the way, I made that all up. It was actually me."
So my background for this one is way more mundane.
I found it really interesting, though.
Yeah, and it's just... So the idea that a pot of soup could be kept bubbling for years, I was curious if that was feasible, or if that would just poison everyone who ate the stuff. Yeah. But so I did a little bit of research. I found a 2019 article about a soup seller in Bangkok who has been cooking the same pot of soup for 45 years.
Does he eat it, though, or just keep it cooking?
I assume he sells it, and if he killed everyone, then presumably he would run out of customers at some point.
Right,
but...
that's a good point. Good point.
So
supply and demand. Demand would go way down.
Exactly. I was planning to say something like, yes, and it turns out that in medieval times we did exactly do this. But in terms of, you go to Bangkok, you can do it today. You can have 45-year-old soup today. And further reading, I found that there was a pot of soup in France that had been kept going since the 1400s.
Wow.
And it came to an end, and only in the Second World War did it come to an end. So it was more than 500 years of continuous...
Wow. See, that's fascinating information.
Yeah. So I was investigating it for pedantry, to see if it belonged in pedantry, but it's perfectly reasonable. It can be done, and as long as you heat it up, it's fine. You can throw puppies in, rats, whatever you want.
Yeah, that's Arya doesn't like to think about when she gets a bite of meat, what that meat might be.
Yeah,
in her bowl of brown. That's what this is coming from. She's living off of this bowl of brown, basically.
Yeah. So comparison with the television show, the book's POV from Arya provides a little bit of distance from the on-stage drama. The TV show is a bit more mixed with sort of the point of view. It is pretty much this chapter, though, because it does start with Arya chasing pigeons.
Okay. Does she whack one out of the sky?
She whacks... Actually, she just jumps on it.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. She achieved that which I was never able to.
That's right. But you may have stopped by 10.
That's true. If I just kept going. Kept my passion going.
That's right.
The visit to the docks is dropped, so she doesn't see the boat. When Arya arrives at Baelor's Sept, the show then more focuses on Ned and what's going on the scene. She basically climbs the Baelor statue, and just watches on.
Okay.
And now we're focused more on what's going on. So I mean, basically exactly what the chapter did, really.
Yeah.
So the High Septon's words, where he sort of, he sort of praises Ned for confessing to his treason and then turns to Joffrey, are slightly incongruously put in the mouth of Grand Maester Pycelle, which they are quite religious in their tone, and it doesn't really sound right coming out of Grand Maester Pycelle's. But basically, I think the TV show just didn't want the High Septon here. There's nobody on the stage who looks like a High Septon of the church.
So they just didn't want to add another character for this scene. They just didn't
want to add another character at that point, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody else up there is basically who you'd expect. The TV show does give a slight crumb of comfort to Ned compared to the book. When Ned is walking up to the stage, I keep calling it the stage, it's just sort of like a raised area where the whole crowd could see him. He walks past Yoren, and he's already noticed Arya on the statue of Baelor.
Ned
has, yeah, he saw her there because she's up above the crowd, he can see her.
Oh, yeah.
As he walks past Yoren, he says, "Baelor, Baelor." And eventually Yoren looks over to Baelor's statue and sees what he's talking about. And of course, Yoren had met Arya before, and so he was able to recognize her. So
that's
it's
clever.
It is clever, and actually, it actually makes the story a little bit more convincing that Yoren gets up to her just in time to prevent her from seeing the execution.
Yes,
because he was basically working on instructions.
I thought it a little bit random that Yoren would have, in that huge, what seemed like a huge mass of humanity, Yoren would have managed to grab her, get that close to her and grab her, because she's small, she can zigzag through
the crowd. Yeah.
He's not so small, he wouldn't have such an easy time.
Yeah. So pedantry, we've got quite a few things to talk about in pedantry, right? So
yeah,
the one that you alluded to earlier is the one that I sort of added to the notes, but I think it's pretty clear. She's in the crowd and she's trying to push her way forward, and she uses needle to try and push her way forward. Now, the crowd has got the sort of bloodlust of it, and it's like, "Arr!" But if you slash at someone with a sword, they're going to react more than, oh, after you.
Right.
If you
At
use
some
the wooden
point, that crowd's going to turn on you.
Exactly. If you use the wooden training sword, maybe. But if you're actually
Right.
slashing at them with needle, they're going to react. And it seems odd. That
Yes. I thought that same thing. I thought, wow, she's whacking at them with a sword. She's got to be creating serious chaos.
Exactly.
People are bleeding and arms dangling. Achilles' heel's been severed.
That's how Yoren found her. It was the trail of bodies she was leaving. Not dead, because she was only hitting them in the legs kind of thing.
Right. There's going to be a bunch of limping people around King's Landing for quite a while.
So the other one I had, if you don't mind me going again, was
Yeah.
Sansa's looking happy. And it struck me as odd that Sansa was looking happy because her father was being dragged in front of the people to confess his crimes.
Yeah.
Happy didn't seem the right emotion there.
Right. You know, I had the same thought, and when I saw your note here, I started thinking about it, and I thought maybe it's just Arya's perspective. Because Sansa, you know, her hardships so far up to this point have been the fact that there's been no one to help her dress and undress, and that the other lords and ladies are ignoring her. Meanwhile, Arya is, you know, living on the streets and eating raw pigeon and, you know, being beaten up by other kids. So just the fact that she's clean and dressed nicely might be enough for Arya to think that Sansa is happy up there.
That is a very good point. That's a very good point because I was thinking she's happy because she's so trusting of Joffrey's honesty and decency. I mean, like, you got to be crazy.
Yeah, I think she is young enough and naive enough to at that moment really think that Joff is going to do what he promised her he was going to do.
But can the thought of Lady's demise ever be very far from your mind?
Yeah.
As a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, whatever she is, you couldn't forget that.
That's true, although she does seem to have the capability of putting a lot of stuff out of mind when it comes to Joffrey.
Yeah, and then just to go back to the TV show, I thought that Sophie Turner, who plays Sansa, did a really good job of this because you see her as Ned is dragged out. Well, he's not dragged out. He's walking with guards around him.
Yeah.
She does smile in a happy way, but the acting is quite subtle and very well done. She looks pained and very, very scared at the same time, but she is sort of putting on a brave face of smiling, which I think is probably exactly what, from Arya's perspective, it looks like happiness, but when you look more carefully, you see that she's
trying to be optimistic, trying to hold on to Joff's promise, but at the same time, very nervous seeing her father be led up onto the pulpit. Right. So I don't know, maybe this isn't pedantry. Maybe I just don't really understand the geography and the layout of King's Landing. But I don't get how Arya is walking along the river and seeing the ships out on the river when, to my understanding, the whole city is surrounded by walls, and she has yet to be able to get through the river gate / mud gate to get to the river. Because, first of all, that gate is only for entering the city, so she couldn't go out that gate anyway if she wanted to. So,
and if she got out of any gate, she wouldn't come back.
Right. So how is she down at the wharfs? How is she at the river's edge if she can't get past the wall? That has not... I looked at it from so many angles and could not figure out, unless there are like sections of the wall that you can go out to the river, but you got to come back in to go across, you go through the river gate. So
first of all, I'm going to argue, but let me say, rock solid. This is perfect pedantry. Well played. But let me make a couple of points here. First of all, let's go to like meta pedantry. If this city is built on, it's got two coastlines. To the north is the coastline to the Blackwater Bay, right?
Right. Yeah.
To the east is the coastline with the river.
Right.
Yeah. Do you know the name of the river?
It's Blackwater Rush. Yeah.
It's the Blackwater Rush.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So the Blackwater Rush. Okay. If you build a city on a coast like that, you don't wall the city all the way around. You wall the city only on the land side. Why would you wall the city on the river side and the?
I wondered that too. Yes.
So that's the meta pedantry. You don't need those walls because the water forms the barrier.
Yes. Right.
Okay, but the walls are there. It's clear. I mean, there are gates in the walls, and so you're absolutely right. So then this comes back now to the first time that Arya went down into the dungeons and came out by the river and had to come back through the gate. So if she did that same thing this time, she was outside the gates of the city.
Yep.
Why did she come back into the city and now get trapped? I have one idea for this. Maybe the west wall and the south wall. I know I'm treating it just as a square, just to be simple, just for simplification.
Most maps do, which makes it very complicated to try and talk about the geography of it.
Right. But maybe those walls run out into the water, so that from the strip of land outside the walls, between the water and the walls, there is no way to get... Yes, you have to come back in through the city.
Yeah, you either have to go out into the water, or you have to come back into the city.
Which she did talk about. She talked about the ability to swim out.
Yeah.
But the Blackwater Bay is notoriously dangerous for swimmers.
Yeah, that would explain it. But it wouldn't explain in this particular chapter.
No,
because she's walking along the river's edge.
Yeah.
But it would explain why she didn't just go out the same, exit out of the dungeon on the outside of the gate and be on her way. Right.
Yeah. This is wrong. She should not be walking the water's edge.
Which is kind of a decent chunk of this chapter is her down by the river. And I'm like, how? I don't understand how she could be down here. Maybe I just don't understand. It could be right. I don't understand how the geography works, maybe.
Yeah. Well played.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, news and notes. Well, we got such a nice email. Made us very, very happy.
It did. Hello, Grace. Thank you.
Hi to Grace.
Yes, we got a fantastic email from a listener named Grace. And
McKelly, tell me, what was the subject line of the email?
I believe, if I remember correctly, it was best podcast, and then in all caps, ever.
Oh, yes, that's right. Now I remember.
That's the one.
We were so happy. We were doing like a virtual Irish jig.
And of course, we read this one sentence in there that she called us celebrities. But of course, as your wife Carson pointed out, she said we were like celebrities. Bringing us right back to earth.
we took what you meant, Grace. We just Carson noticed that the word "like" was in there, and that kind of undermined it. But I'm not listening to her. We're listening to you.
Sorry, we're like Sansa. We focus on the bits we want to focus on. Grace said she liked the background section and the pedantry section.
She'll like today's episode then.
Yeah, I hope so. But she also wanted our takes on the final season of the Game of Thrones TV show, which we can't go into details here because it would spoil. But I really liked your take on it. It was different than the take that I had.
Oh, my take, you mean?
Your take, yeah.
I thought you were talking to Grace now, sorry.
Grace and I were kind of on the same page. You had
you thought it was too rushed and too hurried and too much happening and like...
Yeah, yes.
They'd run out of patience and time and money. And
they're like I said to Grace, it felt like they were like wrapping things up, turning the lights off, kicking us out the door.
Yeah. So my argument was simply that it's hard to have such a big show go on for a long time. Actors have other jobs, and the time required to fill this would have been like maybe 3 more seasons to do it the way you and Grace want it done. And they wouldn't have been able to keep it all together for that long. You'd have to write people out because they didn't want to come back, and eventually you'd just contort the story. So it had flaws, but I was willing to forgive it.
Yeah, that's all. I hadn't thought about it that way from the production perspective.
No, but I mean, believe me, if I could cast a spell and make it the way you and Grace want it, I would certainly do so. That would have been better.
Yes, I just
would have. I'm willing to forgive.
She also asked if we were going to cover the other Song of Ice and Fire books, like the histories, like Fire and Blood and the Dunk and Egg books and stuff. And as much as we would love to do that, I think that would be a lot of fun. It's all about time. And, we struggle fitting in just this episode a week at this point.
Yeah, that being said, though, I think, especially you, through the background, you cover a lot of that through the background, I think. I
do try to. Yeah, that's kind of what a focus that I have when I'm putting together a background is try and cover some of that stuff.
Yeah. So, thank you, Grace. Made our day. Really nice to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful email. We greatly appreciate it.
So let's wrap it up. I've got an idea. Let's get Miri Mazdor to King's Landing stat.
ASAP.
It's going to need more than a horse, I feel.
At this point, yes. She also is going to need some needle and thread.
And if there was ever a debate about who the biggest scoundrel in Game of Thrones is, I think Joffrey's now really taken the scepter.
He's definitely leapfrogged Viserys. Not that Viserys wouldn't have made the same call. He very well might have.
Yeah,
but
probably. He
never got the opportunity to, so therefore Joffrey has now taken the lead, and as Viserys is gone, we're going to need a new challenger here.
You know what Joffrey and Viserys have in common? Their mother and father were brother and sister to one another.
Right. You've mentioned that in the past, that a lot of the product of incest are bad seeds in this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how are Stark's going to respond with their hostages? I mean, I think the short-sighted thing would be to behead Jaime Lannister.
Would be short-sighted because they the Lannisters still have Sansa, and to our knowledge, the Starks don't know that the Lannisters don't have Arya.
Yes. Yeah. But Arya might have found a ticket home. That's kind of good news here.
Jorn should be headed
north. A crumb of comfort.
Right. But it does look like she's going to have to pretend to be a boy for quite a while, so...
Right.
That might be uncomfortable at times.
Yes, it's okay for right now, but over the years it's going to get more difficult.
Yes. And, you got to give it to Jorn for saving her from watching what would have been already a very traumatic experience, but made even more so by actually watching it. He prevented that, and for giving her a cover story. I guess she hadn't thought, I'm going to pretend to be a boy and try and join the Night's Watch.
Right, yeah. And particularly because he wasn't asked to do it. He just did it off his own back here, whereas in the TV show he was prodded to do it. Here he just did it off his own back. All right. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate or a really nice review, we certainly wouldn't mind that. It would really help us out.
All right. Many thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.